Hi, I'm Hannah Nepilova, an integrative counsellor, and welcome to Therapy Chats, the podcast where I talk to specialists from different fields of mental health. My guest today is Dr Joe Hinds, a senior lecturer at the University of Greenwich in London, with clinical experience in a number of settings, including secondary education, substance addiction, and disability. For several years, Dr Hinds has also been working in end-of-life care, which is what I'm speaking to him about today. Can I start off by asking you how you went into or decided to go into working in end of life care?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of an interesting one. It's often some form of accident, if you like. Although I don't believe in that, I'm far more Jungian in terms of synchronicity and stuff. But I was training alongside somebody, and they were running a palliative care um, organization, and I thought to myself that if I was true to this idea that I'm an existential psychotherapist, then I should really test that out in reality. And I stepped into a voluntary position and continued into a paid position over the course of 5 years. Um, on reflection, of course, we never choose these things by accident. Our choice of work is based on something that has occurred to us in our time. We're trying to fix old wounds, as it were, and I've been around death in the family, close family, enough, to want to go out and sort of reprocess some of that, I would say. Um, and it's kind of an interesting world because on one hand, I'm confronted with people who would rather die than confront their emotions. And then there are other people that have said, actually, I've got nothing else to lose now. I want to live in the last 3 months that I've got to live, and they kind of blossom. It's a very, you see people in their raw state. And it's a bit of a, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but there is a privilege in sharing that time with somebody as they reconcile their life and start to embrace death, if indeed that's what they do. My only sense is that these are the great things about the work, is that you understand very quickly that you're not there to fix people, because you can't, it's not possible. But hopefully what you can do in that process is to speak with somebody to such a degree that they go to the next life lighter, that they are unbagged, they're unburdening themselves of the baggage that they've been carrying around. And at that point that they realize that their time is limited, they make a choice of whether to open up that Pandora's box or to keep it firmly closed. Yeah.
I mean, I'm really struck by what you're saying there, because I suppose there is maybe an assumption that working in end of life care might be quite a depressing
Mm,
area to work in.
mm.
And it's interesting because what you're saying seems to be the opposite. Actually, it can be quite uplifting, because you're working with people who really know they have very limited time left and want to make the most of that time, as opposed to what we sometimes get as therapists, which is people who don't feel they have anything to live for and actually want to die.
Yeah.
So yes, that is very striking.
Yeah.
And I guess I want to ask, how do you do that? How do you help? Big, there's the question, isn't there? But maybe, just to hold my hand through the first steps of how
Mm.
you would do that with somebody to help them embrace the time that they've got.
It's unique, it's for each individual. So there's never there's never a sort of a manualized approach to this, and it changes and is different for everybody that you work with. Um, but you do see some of the, I suppose, rebirths. People become alive for the first time in many decades because, yeah, their time is short. Um, yeah, I don't really know how to answer that question really, but
Have you had, I imagine you would have had some very memorable experiences of.
oh yeah, without a doubt, yeah. Yeah. The other thing that we used to do as an organisation, we did have an allocated outdoor space in a small wood, and we used to do a lot of work outdoors. And some of that work was very powerful because, I would see one person, and I saw them through the autumn, the winter, and the spring, but we didn't get to the summer because they died. And that process of going through that seasonal change with them was quite a powerful, for want of a better word, journey through their different phases of life. And so yes, these things do stay. They do stay with you. They certainly have stayed with me, definitely.
I can imagine. And you say you're an existential psychotherapist.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that is the modality that lends itself perhaps best of all, or at least is very, very well suited to working in end of life care?
I
Or
think that yeah, I mean it. I don't want to hide behind modality because the work that I do is through me. I am 50% of the relationship, so it's how I configure the ideas of existential therapy, um, and
how do you configure them?
well, I suppose it comes down to some basic, what I would consider shared universal, human characteristics or human experiences, and the fear of loneliness, the fear of death, trying to find meaning in life. The fact that as a human species we all share, the four cardinal emotions. And it's being able to utilize those things, my own senses of fear of loneliness or fear of loss of meaning in life, to make the empathetic connection with others. So that's how I would configure it at a general level.
Mhm.
I think that it's kind of important that we find a way of finding commonality and similarity, because what we do is an empathetic exercise. We're trying to find a connection, a meaningful connection between therapist and client, and rather than perhaps adhering to the the more contemporary perspective of always talking about difference, for instance. So I
Mhm.
think that there is something kind of very important about finding things that unite us, that bring us together, and it's those real key aspects of what it means to be, in human existence, that's I think we all share as a universal.
Yes, and I imagine, you're facing the end of your life. That can be a potentially very lonely experience. You do it on your own, don't you?
Mm.
And I think it's more important than ever to find somebody who can, yeah, hold your hand through
Mm.
that period. You know,
Absolutely, yeah.
so that you're not going through it alone.
Mm.
And
I
that's where
mean, if you think,
Kamala,
yeah, indeed.
yeah.
There's a lot of, if you look at the a lot of the old rituals, a lot of the indigenous cultures, there are big rituals around this, about the movement from this world to the next. And it's usually a community based thing. There's a sort of it's never done alone entirely, but although the journey is something that you can only do by yourself. Um, but yes, I think the other thing that, of course, we're missing a great deal of in today's society and within the profession is the idea of a spiritual realm or a spiritual understanding. And I think that again is kind of important for bringing in some meaning, which is again, the another existential issue. How do we find meaning in a world that seems to be becoming more and more meaningless? There must be more to life than owning a fast car and making a lot of money. And I think that that we've really kind of restricted our aspirations, and we need to be thinking perhaps in terms of greater ideals. Clarkson talked about the transpersonal world, the connections with all things. Relates to the idea of a sort of Eastern philosophy of oneness with things, and relates very much to to Jung's idea of collective unconscious, that there is something that we can tap into which goes beyond the individual, but we all share it. We all it all connects us.
Mhm. Yes. And there is that question you sometimes, well, one is sometimes asked, if you imagine yourself, 85, 95 years old,
Mm.
and thinking, am I happy with the way that I've lived my life? What would you say, and if not, what could have been better? And then, take some of that and try and, introduce more of it into your life so that you can live the life that you want to live. Is part of the work you do trying to help people see how they have lived a fulfilling life?
But it could be,
Mhm.
yeah, it could be. But I think sometimes it's a case of trying to lighten their load before they go. Try and work through some unfinished business. Go from this place to the next place with less baggage. Um, and
Letting go of some things.
That's it, absolutely, yeah. Reconciliation, acceptance, lots of these things, but it's to do with the very specific individual lived experiences of that person, what they want to let go of, what they can't let go of, or what they don't want to let go of. And maybe there's some things that just cannot be.
And
But at least
sorry, I was going to say, I imagine it must be quite painful to you as a psychotherapist, as it would be to anybody if in those situations when you see somebody not being able to, like someone's load who hasn't been quite lightened at the end.
no,
No?
it's
No?
their choice. It's their choice. Again, a very important existential issue. That my desire or my agenda doesn't feature here because it's not my life, it's not my lived experience, it's not my choice. I can offer the opportunity for somebody to engage in a process. I can present a relationship or a situation for that to unfold, but it really isn't my on my agenda that is fulfilled. They take it as far as they need to take it.
Okay.
Yeah. Otherwise, that I might be trying to live vicariously through my clients. I've got some unfinished business which I don't want to take care of, but I'll make sure that I'll do everything I can to promote change in the individual that I'm working with as a substitute for dealing with my own stuff.
Mhm.
So setting myself aside and working with the client is very important. Giving myself up or giving my sense of what might need to happen here, setting that aside to work entirely with the client is very important.
Mhm. Is that something that you have learned to do, or is it something that came naturally from the start?
Yeah. I think I don't know any therapist, training or otherwise, it hasn't stepped into the business because they have this overriding desire or impulse to help and fix people. And I think that through the course of training, through the course of supervision, through the course of your own therapy and various other things, hopefully there's a realization that that's not the purpose.
Mhm.
That we can only sit alongside, or in your terms, hold hands with someone. And it's whether that intimate relationship is able to convey something of difference to the person in order for them to live differently, but it's up to them.
Okay. Okay. And I guess, I mean, one more question I'd like to ask, which is it's about how you maintain your own positive outlook working in this kind of sphere.
Mm.
Because I imagine for one thing, you maybe quite attached. Well, I don't know if attached is the right word, but certainly develop a fondness for the people that you work with, especially when you meet them on such a sort of profound level and really do get to know them, and then they go.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? How have you learnt to deal with that?
Mm. It's a good question. My old tutor I used to run up to him at the end of a lecture, and I'd ask questions about something, technical. How does, how does projective identification find its way to, in the work with a narcissist? And he'd lay this fatherly hand on my shoulder, and he'd say, "Yeah, that's very important, Joe. But let's talk about the thing that's really important first. Let's talk about music." And what he was trying to convey to me was that we need to have or need to live a fulfilled life which is outside of the therapy, because if we find fulfillment within the therapy, then things can become a bit messy. So it's important to have that fulfillment that so that you're not reliant on the therapy for your fulfillment.
Mhm.
It can be a useful addition,
Thank you
but
for listening.
it's not
If you'd
healthy
like
for
to
it to
hear
be the
more of the
mainstay.
same, then feel free to subscribe to our
Okay. Are you
podcast
saying then
or visit our
through
YouTube
things like
channel
hobbies,
at Kent House
what you do
Counselling.
outside of the therapy room, that's what brings.
That and the recognition that, of course, the lived experience of the other is theirs. That I'm responsible to them, but I'm not responsible for them. And to cut, it's like meeting people, and saying goodbye at the end. They pass. People come and they go. I don't want to hold on to that, because that's the sort of thing that can become tiresome. It can become, you know, problematic. We think here things like burnout and stuff. And my own sense of burnout is that there's unprocessed material in the therapist, which is, if it can be worked through, you're not fighting. There's not an internal battle, if you like. So you're able to work through your own material as best you can in order to work with the client, but it's their stuff.
This stuff.
I'm always reminded of that. That the analogy, the story of if you're on a aeroplane and there's decompression in the cabin, you're supposed to reach for your own mask before you put it on the person that you're responsible for, and that's the same issue. We have to attend to ourselves before we tend to anybody else.
Mm-hmm. 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 And what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I wonder if it's difficult to do, or it has been difficult to do.
Indeed, I think what I'd say about that is that it's going to be different and more or less difficult depending on the nature of the person that we're talking about. I'd like to say that it also comes down to a simple attitude. I choose to live. I choose to die. I choose to work with this person this way. But maybe that's too simplistic. Maybe there is a process that needs to be engaged in before you can get to that simple realization. But there's something about making a decision about this. You have to be aware first. You have to have a self-awareness in order to make an informed decision. You can't just say something and still have the unconscious working against what you've just said. So there has to be an informed decision about how you choose to be in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes through, obviously, a process, training, therapy, supervision, life events, crises, trauma. You eventually get to an understanding or better understanding of where you are and what you're willing to do and accept.
And I guess that maybe those, in a way, personal boundaries really come into play when you're working with people at the end of their lives.
Mm. Yeah, indeed. And some more permeable than others.
Yes, I see that. And I guess I said that was the last question. I always do this. I say that was the last question, and then I've got one more.
No, it's not a problem.
Like, it's sort of what for you personally have been the rewards of working in end of life care?
I've met people, and I've met people who no longer have a facade or hide behind a surface level, of interaction. That they become real at times. Not all of them, as I said, some people will choose to go to their deaths without expressing their true emotions. But on the whole, and this goes for all my work because I've not been in palliative care for a number of years, the same things apply. The same understandings apply, but I meet people.
Mm-hmm.
And, irrespective of how they present, there's a child in there somewhere that needs to be recognized, acknowledged, seen, heard. And it's about meeting that, meeting the essence of the person.
And just maybe people might be more willing to do that at this stage in their life than perhaps they were before, when perhaps there was more at stake.
Yeah, we all live a fantasy that we're going to live forever, don't we? We're not thinking that tomorrow could be my last day. Whereas it's just as likely to be tomorrow is 10 years' time. but we put those things to the back of our minds. We don't consider them. But when you're given a diagnosis and there's more of a certainty about it, yes, I think there is a choice to be made there about whether you live for the rest of your limited existence or whether you continue doing what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And they're two very distinct paths with several paths in between that can be taken. But
yeah, I remember speaking to somebody who said that it's striking how at the end of, or people who have been told they have a terminal illness and their time is limited, how their listening becomes razor sharp because they cut away all the distractions.
we're all terminal.
Mm.
The thing is that they have the advantage because they know it,
Mm-hmm.
but we're all terminal. And the sooner we get to grips with that, the sooner we start to live a life.
Mm. Yeah,
Mm.
it's about having the deadline. If
Oh,
the deadline's tomorrow,
yeah,
it focuses the mind.
yeah, absolutely. And a very good use of word as well, deadline.
No, precisely.
Mm.
Gosh, well, Joe, thank you so much for
Okay.
speaking to me about.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to hear more of the same, then feel free to subscribe to our podcast or visit our YouTube channel at Kent House Counselling.